The chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a cathedral built for giants, its walls carved from black stone that seemed to swallow light itself. And Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of it all, feeling very small and very alone. 12 species had gathered here today to decide the fate of humanity, and Elena could feel their eyes upon her like the weight of 1,000 suns pressing down on her shoulders. The Dominari sat in the highest seats, their 4 eyes gleaming with barely concealed contempt, their scaled bodies wrapped in robes of deep purple that signified their status as the founding species of this council that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Beside them sat the Teveth, insectoid creatures with clicking mandibles and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's dim light in 1,000 fractured images. And they had never liked humans. Not from the first moment of contact when a human diplomat had accidentally crushed one of their sacred greeting beetles. The architects loomed in their section like living mountains of crystal and stone. Silicon-based life forms who communicated through vibrations that humans could barely perceive. And they had expressed concern about human unpredictability in 17 separate committee meetings. Elena had memorized every species, every delegate, every voting pattern and political alliance that might affect today's outcome. Because today was the day that humanity would learn whether it had a future among the stars or whether it would be forever trapped in the prison of its own. Solar System High Arbiter Kexton rose from his seat, his 4 eyes scanning the chamber with the practiced ease of someone who had delivered 10,000 verdicts and never once doubted his own judgment. The petition of the species known as humanity for full membership in the Galactic Council has been considered, he announced, his voice carrying through the chamber like thunder rolling across an empty plain. And a vote has been taken according to the ancient protocols established by our founders. Elena held her breath as the holographic display flickered to life above. The chamber floor, 11 red lights appeared, one after another, each one representing a vote against humanity's petition. And Elena watched them appear with a face that showed nothing of the storm raging inside her heart. Only one light glowed yellow, the color of abstention, and that single light belonged to the Velith, a minor species with little power and less influence, who had chosen to neither support nor condemn humanity's request. The vote is concluded, Kexton declared, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like satisfaction. Humanity's petition is denied. A murmur rippled through the chamber, though whether it was approval or merely acknowledgement Elena could not tell. Furthermore, Kexton continued, and Elena felt her heart grow cold as she listened. The Council has determined that humanity poses a potential threat to galactic stability, and therefore additional measures must be implemented for the safety of all member species. He listed the restrictions one by one, and each one fell upon Elena like a hammer blow. Humanity's 3 colony ships, already en route to distant star systems, would be intercepted and their passengers. Return to Earth humanity would be forbidden from developing. Faster than light travel beyond the most basic levels necessary for solar system. Exploration humanity's military would be subject to quarterly inspections. By Council observers, humanity would be confined to the Sol system indefinitely, with no right of appeal for a minimum of 500 standard years. When Kexton finished speaking, the chamber fell silent, and Elena knew that every eye was upon her, waiting to see how the human ambassador would react to the death of her species. Dreams. She could feel the anger burning inside her like a star going nova. Could feel the urge to scream and rage and demand justice from these beings who had judged humanity unworthy without ever truly understanding what humanity was. But Elena Vasquez had not been chosen for this mission because she was prone to emotional outbursts. She had been chosen because she understood that there were moments when silence spoke louder than any words. And this was such a moment. May I address the Council? she asked, her voice steady and calm. Kex then gestured his permission with one clawed hand, clearly expecting a plea for mercy or perhaps a defiant tirade that would only confirm the Council's judgment of human instability. Elena did neither. "I want the record to show," she said, speaking slowly and clearly so that every translator in the chamber could capture her words perfectly, "that humanity came before this council in good faith, following every protocol and procedure that was required of us." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "I want the record to show that we submitted to your inspections, answered your questions, and treated every member of this council with respect and dignity, even those who made their contempt for our species clear from the beginning." The Teveth delegation shifted uncomfortably, and Elena allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. "And I want the record to show," she concluded, "that we gave you every opportunity to choose differently." Kextham leaned forward, his four eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Is that a threat, Ambassador Vasquez?" Elena met his gaze without flinching. "No, High Arbiter, it is not a threat. It is simply a time stamp. A marker in history that future generations will look back upon and remember." She gathered the documents from her podium. Moving with deliberate slowness, "Humanity accepts the Council's decision, and we will comply with the restrictions you have imposed upon us." The chamber seemed to deflate slightly, as if the delegates had been expecting something more dramatic and were now disappointed by humanity's quiet surrender. Elena turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast space, and she did not look back in her shuttle. Speeding toward the human diplomatic vessel waiting in orbit, Elena allowed herself one long breath before opening the secure communication channel. Her message was 3 words long. They voted no, 8 billion kilometers away, deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, in a bunker that officially did not exist. General Marcus Chen received the message on a screen that officially had never been built. He read the 3 words twice, then turned to face the assembled commanders of humanity's unified military forces, men and women from every nation on Earth, who had set aside centuries of rivalry for this single moment. "It's done," he said, and his voice carried no surprise because they had all known this was the most likely outcome. "Begin Project Prometheus." Around the table, faces that had been tense with anticipation now settled into expressions of grim determination. They had hoped for peace, had genuinely wanted to join the galactic community as equal partners. But they had also prepared for this, because humans had learned long ago that hope was not a strategy in laboratories hidden beneath deserts and mountains and ocean floors. Scientists who had been waiting for this signal began their real work in factories disguised as abandoned industrial sites. Machines that had been idle for months hummed to life in military academies around the world. Training programs that had existed only in classified files were suddenly activated. The Galactic Council had made its decision, and now humanity would make its own. They had wanted to be friends, but the Council had chosen to make them enemies. And if there was one thing humanity understood better than friendship, it was how to be the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever seen. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in her shuttle and watched the Council station grow smaller in the viewport, and she allowed herself a small, cold smile. "You have no idea what you have just done," she whispered to no one in particular. "But you will learn, and when you do, you will wish you had voted differently." The stars stretched out before her, cold and distant and full of species who thought they had tamed humanity with their vote. They were wrong. They were so very wrong. 5 years passed, and to the Galactic Council, those years seemed to confirm everything they had believed about humanity. Their intelligence reports painted a picture of a broken species, a people whose dreams had been crushed and whose spirit had been shattered by the weight of galactic judgment. The humans were fighting among themselves again, the report said, squabbling over resources and territory on their single overcrowded planet. While their birth rates declined and their once ambitious space programs withered into nothing. High Arbiter Kex then read these reports with satisfaction during his morning briefings, nodding his great-scaled head as his advisors assured him that the human problem had been solved. They are a primitive species, his chief intelligence officer would say, aggressive but ultimately weak. And now that we have shown them their place, they have accepted it. Kex then believed this because it was what he wanted to believe, and because nothing in the reports suggested otherwise. What the reports did not tell him, what no Council intelligence agency had managed to discover, was that everything they were seeing was a carefully constructed lie. The humans were not fighting among themselves. They were pretending to fight while working together in secret on a scale that would have seemed impossible to any species that did not understand what humans could accomplish. When they shared a common enemy for the first time in their long and bloody history, every nation on Earth had united behind a single purpose. The squabbles that Council satellites observed from orbit were theater, staged conflicts designed to make the Watchers believe that humanity was too busy destroying itself to pose any threat to the trust of the galaxy. The declining birth rates were real, but not because humans had lost hope. They were declining because millions of people were being relocated to vast, underground cities that the Council had never detected. Cities built and abandoned, mines and natural caverns and purpose-dug tunnels that stretched for hundreds of kilometers beneath the Earth's surface. The withering space programs were also real, at least on the surface. What the Council did not see were the 17 shipyards hidden deep underground, where engineers worked around the clock to build a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. In a laboratory beneath the Sahara Desert, Yuki Tanaka finally cracked the secret of the Council's interdiction field, the technology that prevented unauthorized species from developing. True faster than light travel, she had spent 3 years studying captured fragments of Council technology, running simulations, testing theories that her peers had called impossible. And now she held the answer in her hands. The interdiction field worked by detecting the specific energy signature of conventional FTL drives. But Dr. Tanaka had developed something new, a drive system that operated on principles the Council had never imagined, slipping between dimensions rather than pushing through normal space. When she tested the first prototype, it vanished from her laboratory and reappeared on the dark side of the moon 3 seconds later, leaving no trace for any sensor to detect in Mumbai. A team of engineers perfected the weapon systems that would arm humanity's secret fleet. Weapons that used the same dimensional principles as the new drives to strike targets from impossible distances. In Snow Polo, military strategists ran thousands of simulated battles against Council forces, learning from every defeat, refining their tactics until they had found the weaknesses in every enemy formation. In Beijing, psychologists compiled detailed profiles of every Council species, studying their cultures and histories and decision-making patterns until they could predict how each species would react to any given situation. And in Lisbon, Ambassador Elena Vasquez tended her garden and played the role of a broken woman living out her final years in quiet retirement. Every Thursday, she met with other retired diplomats for lunch at a small cafe near the harbor, where they discussed grandchildren and weather and memories of better times. What the Council observers who watched her did not understand was that every conversation was coded. Every discussion of wine preferences and travel destinations. Actually, a detailed analysis of galactic politics and potential allies. Elena had identified 17 species who might be willing to support humanity against the Council. Species who had been wronged or marginalized or simply ignored by the ruling powers, the Velith, who had abstained from the vote against humanity, had been denied emergency aid when a plague struck their agricultural colonies. The Keth, once a prosperous trading species, had been economically strangled by Council tariffs until They were barely surviving, the YTH still remembered their conquered homeworld and dreamed of the day when the Dominari who had taken it from them would face justice. These species and others like them were not enemies of humanity. They were potential friends. If only someone would offer them friendship. Elena compiled her findings in reports that were transmitted through channels so secret that even most of Earth's leaders did not know they existed. And slowly a plan took shape. Humanity would not simply build a fleet and challenge the Council to open warfare. That would be suicide. No matter how advanced their technology, instead, they would build something far more powerful. They would build alliances. They would find the cracks in the Council's unity and widen them into chasms. They would offer help to those who had been denied it, friendship to those who had been rejected, and hope to those who had forgotten what hope felt like. And when the time came to reveal themselves, they would not stand alone. General Chun, now 5 years older and 5 years more patient, reviewed the progress reports each month in his underground command center. The fleet was nearly complete. 347 ships of various classes, each one equipped with technology that would seem like magic to Council observers. The weapons were ready, tested in secret ranges at the edge of the solar system, where no Council satellite ever looked. The soldiers were trained. Millions of men and women who had volunteered knowing they might never see the surface of Earth again, and the Allies were waiting. Contacted through back channels and secret meetings, promised that when humanity made its move, they would not be forgotten. How much longer? Asked Admiral Sarah Okonkwo, commander of the First Fleet. During one of their planning sessions, Chun studied the reports spread across the table before him. Calculations of Council patrol routes and political tensions and economic indicators that all pointed toward a moment of maximum opportunity. 6 months, he said finally. Maybe 7. The Velith situation is deteriorating faster than we expected. And when they call for help, we need to be ready to answer. Okonkwo nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of tactical displays. And if the Council discovers us before then, they will not, Chun said with certainty born of 5 years of successful deception. They see what they want to see. And what they want to see is a broken species trapped in a prison of our own despair. He stood and walked to the window that looked out over the vast underground hangar where humanity's flagship was taking shape. A vessel so advanced that it made Council technology look primitive by comparison. They think they have caged us, he said quietly. They do not understand that they have merely given us time to build our strength and focus our purpose. He turned back to face his officers, and there was something in his eyes that had not been there 5 years ago. A cold certainty that bordered on the terrifying. 5 years ago, they told us we were unworthy of the stars, he said. In 6 months, we will show them exactly how wrong they were. In her garden in Lisbon, Elena Vasquez pruned her roses and smiled at the Council observation drone passing overhead. She waved at it cheerfully, playing her role perfectly. Inside, she was counting the days until humanity's quiet years would end and their loud years would begin. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. That was exactly how humanity wanted it. The Velith colony of New Harmony was dying, and no one in the galaxy seemed to care. The plague had started in their agricultural domes 3 months ago, a fungal infection that spread through their crops like wildfire and left nothing but black rot in its wake. Colony Administrator Thesa had sent 17 requests for emergency aid to the Galactic Council, each one more desperate than the last, and each one had been denied. The Velith are a minor species, the Council's response had said, using diplomatic language that barely disguised its contempt, and resources must be prioritized for member worlds of greater strategic importance. Thesa had read those words and felt something die inside her. The last remnant of faith she had held that the Council would protect its members. Now she stood at the observation window of her command center, watching her people line up at food distribution stations where there was almost no food left to distribute. And she wondered how many more days they had before the riots began. "Administrator," said her communications officer, his voice strange and tight. "We are detecting an unknown vessel entering the system." Thesa turned sharply, her four-fingered hands clenching into fists. "Council inspection team?" "No, Administrator," the officer said. And now Thesa could hear something in his voice that she had not heard for months. It was hope. "The vessel is broadcasting a human identification signal." Thesa felt her legs grow. Weak beneath her humans, the species that the Council had imprisoned in their own solar system, forbidden from traveling beyond the boundaries of their sun's light. "That is impossible," she whispered. "I am receiving a transmission," the officer said. "Audio and video, shall I put it through?" Thesa nodded, not trusting her voice. The main screen flickered, and a human face appeared. It was a woman, middle-aged by human standards, wearing what appeared to be a medical uniform with a symbol that Thesa did not recognize, but somehow found reassuring. "Colony New Harmony," the woman said, speaking in perfect Velith with an accent that suggested she had learned the language recently, but thoroughly. "My name is Dr. Maria Santos of the Human Medical Corps. We have received word of your situation, and we are here to help. If you will have us." Thesa stared at the screen, unable to process what she was hearing. How is this possible? She managed to ask. "The Council, the interdiction field, you cannot be here," Dr. Santos smiled. And there was something in that smile that made Thesa think of sunrises after long nights. "With respect, Administrator, we are here, and we have brought supplies. Agricultural specialists, medical personnel, and enough food to sustain your colony until your crops can be restored. May we have permission to land?" Thesa looked at her staff, seeing the same stunned disbelief on their faces that she felt in her own heart. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, you may land." 12 hours later, the first human shuttles touched down on New Harmony's landing pads, and what emerged from them would change the Velith understanding of the galaxy forever. Human agricultural specialists immediately set to work analyzing the fungal plague. And within 6 hours they had identified its origin and developed a treatment. Human doctors fanned out through the colony, treating the sick with medicines that seemed almost miraculous in their effectiveness. Human engineers repaired failing life support systems that the Velith had been struggling to maintain for weeks, and everywhere they went, the humans smiled and spoke kindly and asked for nothing in return. Thesa found Dr. Santos in the main agricultural dome, supervising the deployment of engineered organisms that were already beginning to consume the fungal infection. "Why?" Thesa asked. And it was the only question that mattered. "Why would you help us? What do you want from us?" Pierre Santos paused her work and turned to face the Velith administrator. "Do you remember the vote?" she asked. 6 years ago, when the Council decided to imprison humanity in our own solar system. Thesa remembered. She remembered the shame she had felt as her species representative cast an abstention vote. Too afraid to support humanity openly, but unwilling to condemn them. "Your people were the only ones who did not vote against us," Dr. Santos said. "You were the only ones who showed us even that small mercy. And we do not forget our friends." She gestured at the dome around them, at the human workers who were saving a colony that the Council had abandoned. "You asked what we want from you," she said, "and the answer is simple. We want you to remember this day. Remember that when the Council turned its back on you, humanity reached out its hand." Thesa felt tears forming in her eyes, an emotional response that Velith rarely displayed in public. "The Council will punish you for this," she said. "When they learn what you have done here, they will send their fleets to destroy you." Dr. Santos nodded slowly. "Yes, they probably will try. But that is a problem for another day. Today, the only problem that matters is saving your people. And that is a problem we intend to solve. Over the following weeks, Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. A human trade delegation arrived in Keth space, offering fair deals and favorable terms to a species that had been economically strangled by Council policies for generations. A human diplomatic vessel made contact with the orbital collective, the machine intelligence that the Council had declared non-sapient and quarantined from all galactic affairs. And the humans treated them not as malfunctions to be contained, but as people to be respected. A human intelligence operative met in secret with leaders of the ETH resistance, sharing detailed information about Dominari military weaknesses and promising support when the time came to reclaim their stolen homeworld. Humanity was not building an empire. They were building something far more valuable. They were building a coalition of the forgotten, the abandoned, and the oppressed, a network of species who had been wronged by the Council and who now had a powerful new friend. The Council first learned of human activity beyond Sol when a Dominari patrol ship encountered a human vessel near the Keth trading routes. Captain Threx of the patrol ship Blade of Justice demanded immediate surrender, confident that his superior firepower would force the primitive humans to comply. The human captain, a young woman named Lieutenant Commander Yuki Chun, politely declined Threx open fire. The engagement lasted 11 seconds when it was over. The Blade of Justice was drifting dead in space. Its weapons melted to slag and its engines reduced to scrap metal. But its life support was intact and its crew was unharmed. Lieutenant Commander Chun transmitted a message to the nearest Council relay station, knowing it would be received by every species in the galaxy within hours. Humanity formally announces its withdrawal from the Sol restriction treaty on grounds of systemic violations of sapient rights by Council member species. We invite the Council to reconsider its policies. We do not invite military response. This communication serves as both notification and warning. High Arbiter Kexton received the message during a routine Council session, and for a long moment he simply stared at the words on his screen. Then, he began to give orders. The combined fleet would be assembled. Every Council species would contribute ships. Humanity would be taught its place once and for all. As he issued his commands, Kexton felt confident that this challenge would be easily crushed. He did not know that in secret bases across the galaxy, human strategists were watching his response and nodding with satisfaction. He did not know that humanity had spent 5 years preparing for exactly this moment. He did not know that the war he was about to start was a war he had already lost, but he would learn very soon. He would learn. The combined fleet gathered at the nexus point like a storm cloud forming before a hurricane. 4,000 warships from 11 species, carrying enough firepower to crack planets and burn worlds. High Arbiter Kexton stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical display fill with friendly signals until the screen was almost solid with blue lights. Never in the history of the galaxy had such a force been assembled. The Dominari had contributed 800 of their finest battleships, massive vessels bristling with weapons that had conquered a dozen species. The Teveth had sent their swift attack craft, a swarm of 500 needle-sharp ships designed to overwhelm enemies through sheer numbers. The architects had deployed their legendary dreadnoughts, vessels made of living crystal that could absorb and redirect energy weapons. Species after species had answered the call, each one eager to prove their loyalty to the Council and share in the glory of crushing the upstart human. Kexton allowed himself a rare smile as he surveyed his armada. Signal all commands, he ordered. Prepare for combat. The humans will be here soon. His tactical officer looked up with confusion in his eyes. High Arbiter, how do you know when they will arrive? They could approach from any direction. Kexton's smile widened. Because they are human, and humans cannot resist a challenge. They know we are gathering here, and their pride will demand that they face us. He was right. Though not in the way he imagined, the human fleet appeared 12 hours later, emerging from FDL in a burst of light that should have been impossible. Council sensors detected 347 human vessels, a force outnumbered more than 10 to 1 by the combined fleet. Laughter rippled through the Council command channels. "This is their great fleet?" sneered Admiral Vexthen, Kexthen's nephew and commander of the Dominari Vanguard. "We will destroy them in minutes." Kexthen felt a flicker of unease that he could not explain. Something about the way the human ships held their formation, perfectly still and perfectly calm, despite facing annihilation. "All ships advance," he ordered. Weapons free, the combined fleet surged forward like a wave crashing toward shore. Thousands of weapons charging and targeting, systems locking onto the tiny human vessels. The humans did not retreat. They did not even move, and then they opened fire. The first volley crossed the impossible distance between the fleets in less than a heartbeat. Weapons that seemed to slip between dimensions rather than traveling through normal space. 17 Dominari battleships simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris, no dying screams on the communication channels. The ships were simply there one moment and gone the next, erased from reality as if they had never been. Panic erupted across the combined fleet. Kexthen watched, his tactical display filled with red warning lights as ship after ship reported impossible damage from weapons that should not have been able to reach them. "All ships return fire," he shouted. "Concentrate on their flagship." 1,000 weapons spoke at once, filling the space between the fleets with a storm of energy and projectiles that should have vaporized every human ship in existence. Humans did not even bother to dodge their point defense systems, operating at speeds that suggested they could predict incoming fire before it was launched. Intercepted everything missiles were shot down by lasers that moved too fast to track. Energy beams were absorbed by shields that should not have existed. According to Council physics, projectiles were deflected by systems that seemed to bend space itself, and all the while, the human weapons kept firing. The Teveth attack swarm tried to close the distance, relying on their speed to carry them into range of their short-range weapons. Human targeting systems tracked each ship individually, calculating trajectories and interception points with perfect accuracy. The swarm became a cloud of expanding debris in less than 30 seconds. The architect dreadnoughts pushed forward in a solid wall, confident that their legendary armor could withstand anything the humans could throw at them. Human weapons found the microscopic flaws in their crystalline hulls, imperfections so small that even the architects had never detected them. The dreadnoughts shattered like glass struck by hammers. Kexthen watched the slaughter with growing horror, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. This was not a battle. This was an execution. "All ships retreat," he ordered, his voice cracking with desperation. "Fall back to secondary positions." But it was too late. Human ships that had seen so few were everywhere now, having used their impossible engines to flank and surround the combined fleet. Council vessels trying to flee found their escape routes blocked. Those that tried to fight found their weapons useless against technology they could not comprehend. And then Kexthen noticed something that made his blood run cold. The humans were not killing their weapons, so devastating when aimed at ships' weapons and engines, were deliberately avoiding life support systems and crew quarters. They were not trying to destroy the combined fleet. They were trying to capture it. Ship after ship fell silent as human boarding parties teleported directly through their hulls, appearing in corridors and engine rooms and bridges with weapons that stunned rather than killed. The mighty warriors of a dozen species found themselves helpless against humans who moved with perfect coordination, who seemed to know exactly where every defender would be before they got there. By the time the battle ended, humanity had lost 4 ships. The Council had lost everything. 3,000 vessels drifted dead in space. Their crews alive but imprisoned. The 1,000 ships that had managed to flee were scattered across a dozen systems. Too damaged and demoralized to pose any further threat, Caxton stood on his bridge surrounded by human soldiers. Watching as Admiral Sarah Okonkwo appeared on his main screen, she was young for a human flag officer. But her eyes held a weight that suggested she had seen things that had aged her beyond her years. "High Arbiter," she said, her voice calm and professional. "Humanity requests an emergency session of the Galactic Council. We have some proposed amendments to your charter that we would like to discuss." Caxton felt his legs threaten to give way beneath him. "You cannot force the Council to do anything. Even with our fleet destroyed, the other species will never accept human domination." Okonkwo smiled, and there was something terrible in that smile. "High Arbiter, you misunderstand the situation. We are not forcing anyone to do anything. We are simply presenting a proposal, and as of this morning, 7 of your 11 member species have already indicated their support for our amendments." "Impossible," Caxton whispered. "They would never betray the Council." "They are not betraying the Council," Okonkwo replied. "They are joining the new one. The vote is scheduled for tomorrow. I strongly suggest you attend." She paused, and her smile faded into something harder. "You should also know that 2 million of your soldiers are now our prisoners of war. They are being treated humanely and will be returned to their homeworlds once this matter is settled. We are not murderers, High Arbiter. We never were." The screen went dark, leaving Caxton alone with the ruins of everything he had believed about humanity and the galaxy. He had thought them primitive. He had thought them weak. Had thought them broken. He had been wrong about everything, and tomorrow he would have to face the consequences of his mistakes in the very chamber where he had once pronounced judgment upon them. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony, and humanity had a very long memory. The Galactic Council chamber looked exactly as it had 6 years ago, when Ambassador Elena Vasquez had stood at the petitioners' platform and heard her species condemned to eternal imprisonment. The same black walls stretched toward the distant ceiling. The same holographic displays floated in the air. The same seats held representatives of the galaxy species. But everything had changed. The Dominari delegation, once the undisputed masters of this chamber, sat in humiliated silence in seats that seemed to have grown smaller overnight. Their fleet was destroyed. Their warriors were prisoners, and their pride had been shattered beyond repair. The Teveth seats were empty, their government having collapsed in the chaos following the battle, leaving their species leaderless and adrift. The architects had sent a single representative, an ancient being of crystal and stone who refused to meet anyone's eyes and had not spoken a word since entering the chamber. But if the old powers had diminished, the forgotten species had risen. Administrator Thessa of the Velith sat with her head held high, her delegation occupying seats of honor near the center of the chamber. The Keth representative lounged in his chair with the easy confidence of someone who no longer feared economic retaliation. The YTH had sent their first delegation since their homeworld's conquest. Warriors wearing the traditional armor of their ancestors and carrying ceremonial weapons that the Dominari had forbidden for centuries. And at the edges of the chamber sat new faces, the crystalline avatars of the orbital collective, finally recognized as people rather than property, and representatives of a dozen minor species who had never been allowed to speak before. Today, Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked to the central podium, moving with the careful dignity of someone who understood the weight of the moment. She was older now than she had been 6 years ago, her hair streaked with gray, and her face lined with the marks of years spent waiting for this day. But her eyes were the same, sharp and clear, and filled with a purpose that had never wavered. "The council will come to order," she announced, and her voice carried through the chamber with an authority that no human voice had ever held in this place. "I am addressing you today not as a petitioner, but as the speaker of this reformed assembly." A murmur rippled through the chamber, and Elena allowed it to pass before continuing. 6 years ago, I stood in this chamber and heard humanity condemned as too dangerous to be trusted with the stars. I was told that we were too aggressive, too ambitious, and too unpredictable. I was told that we would be confined to our solar system for the safety of the galaxy. She paused. Letting the silence stretch, I accepted that judgment. And I told this council that I wanted the record to show that we had given you every opportunity to choose differently. Today I am here to explain what I meant by those words. She touched a control on the podium, and the holographic display came to life with images. The first showed the Veloth colony of New Harmony, green and thriving where it had once been dying. The second showed Keth, trading ships moving freely through space lanes that had been closed to them for generations. The third showed the YTH homeworld. No longer occupied by dominatory forces, image after image appeared, showing the work that humanity had done while the Council had been preparing its war medical missions to plague-stricken worlds engineering, teams rebuilding failing infrastructure, diplomatic delegations offering friendship to species that had been forgotten by the galaxy while you were building a fleet to destroy us, Elena said. We were building alliances to replace you while you were planning our extinction. We were planning a future where no species would ever again be told they were unworthy of the stars. She let the images fade and turned to face the assembled delegations directly. Today you will vote on a new charter for this council. A charter that establishes universal rights for all sapient beings. A charter that prohibits any species from being restricted in their expansion or development. A charter that replaces the old order of power and domination with a new order of cooperation and mutual respect. High Arbiter Kexton, stripped of his title but still representing the Dominari, rose from his seat. "And if we refuse?" he asked, his voice carrying a last defiant edge. "Will you destroy us as you destroyed our fleet?" Elena looked at him for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than it had been. "No. High Arbiter, we will not destroy you. We did not destroy your fleet, and we will not destroy your species. Because we are not you." She stepped down from the podium and walked toward where Kexton stood, stopping close enough that she could speak to him directly. 6 years ago, you looked at humanity and saw a threat to be contained. You saw our aggression and our ambition, and you feared what we might become if we were allowed to spread among the stars. You thought that caging us would protect the galaxy from our dangerous nature. She shook her head slowly. You were wrong. Not about our nature, but about what our nature meant. Yes, we are aggressive. But we use that aggression to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Yes, we are ambitious. But we use that ambition to dream of a better future for everyone. Yes, we are unpredictable, but that is because we refuse to accept that things must always be the way they have always been. She turned to address the entire chamber. Humanity did not come to the stars to conquer. We came to the stars because we believe that every sapient being deserves the chance to reach for something greater than themselves. We came because we believe that the universe is too vast and too wonderful to be ruled by fear and suspicion and the narrow interests of those who happen to develop faster than light travel first. She returned to the podium and looked out at the assembled species, allies and former enemies alike. Today you have a choice. You can vote for the new charter and join us in building a galaxy where every species matters. Or you can vote against it and return to the old ways of power and oppression. But know this. Humanity will never again accept chains, and we will never stop fighting for those who are still bound by them. The vote was called one by one. The species registered their positions. The Veluth voted yes with tears in their eyes. The Keth voted yes with shouts of celebration. The Orbital Collective voted yes with a precision that somehow conveyed deep emotion. The YTH voted yes while their warriors beat their weapons against the floor in approval. Even the architects, after a long pause, voted yes with a resonance that seemed to shake the chamber itself. When Kexton's turn came, he stood slowly and looked around the chamber at the new order taking shape before his eyes. The Dominari vote yes, he said, and each word seemed to cost him something precious. Elena nodded. The motion carries, the new charter is adopted. This council is adjourned. As the delegations began to file out, Kexton approached Elena one final time. You planned all of this, he said. From the moment of the vote, you knew exactly what you were going to do. Elena considered the question carefully before answering. We prepared for it. There is a difference between planning and preparing. We hoped for peace. We genuinely wanted to join your community as equals. But we knew that might not be possible, and we prepared accordingly. You could have destroyed us, Kexton said. Your weapons, your fleet. You could have wiped every species that voted against you from existence. Yes. Why did you not? Elena looked at him with something that might have been pity. Because we remember what it felt like to be told we did not deserve the stars. We remember the despair and the anger and the sense that the universe had judged us unworthy. And we would not wish that feeling on anyone, not even on those who made us feel it. She turned to leave, then paused. The galaxy is changing, High Arbiter. Humanity is part of that change, whether you welcome it or not. But we would rather be your partners than your conquerors. We would rather build the future with you than despite you. She met his eyes one last time. The choice of what role the Dominari play in that future is yours to make. I hope you choose wisely. She walked out of the chamber, leaving Kexton alone with the weight of history settling onto his shoulders. Outside, the galaxy turned on beneath a new order. Human ships patrolled the trade routes, keeping them safe for all species. Human doctors and engineers spread across 1,000 worlds, helping wherever they could. Human diplomats worked to resolve conflicts that had festered for millennia. They were still aggressive, still ambitious, still unpredictable, but now they were in charge, and somehow, against all expectations, that seemed to be exactly what the galaxy needed. In her quarters, aboard the human diplomatic vessel, Elena Vasquez poured herself a glass of wine and looked out at the stars. 6 years ago, she had left this station in defeat, carrying the weight of her species' condemnation. Today, she left it in triumph, carrying the hope of a better future for everyone. She raised her glass to the stars. To humanity, she said quietly. We came in peace, they chose war, and somehow we managed to win both. She drank, and the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly how humanity wanted it.